2025 was a standout year for adventure games. Point-and-click fans finally got fed. January alone dropped a handful of smaller, old-school treats. Shelter from the Storm, a 30-minute pixel art escape from a creepy house, Worm Ventures, Barrier 51, a full cartoon sci-fi romp about a worm trying to save his planet, and The Campsite, a compact, classic graphic adventure in the weird one night gone terribly wrong tradition. Then February hit with Cabernet, a stat-driven vampire narrative that eats evenings for dinner, and it started to feel like the genre had finally stepped back into fighting form. From there, it didn't slow down. The Beekeeper's Picnic in March, Old Skies in April, Near Mage in May, The Drifter in July, and Foolish Mortals, arriving in November as the late-year ghost story closer. So this is my personal roundup of the 10 adventure games that defined 2025 for me, a point-and-click gremlin. Not every great release is here. I didn't even get to play half of the games that I wanted to this year, and this isn't going to be about Metacritic scores or sales charts. It's just about the games that stuck with me after the credits rolled. So without further ado, here are my top 10 adventure games from 2025. Starting off with number 10, Brass Heart. Brass Heart is what happens if you throw a diesel engine and a Jules Verne novel into a blender and somehow get a very earnest point and click. Brass Heart takes place in an alternate 1920s reality, and you play Pola, a sharp, upbeat airplane pilot whose life gets turned upside down by one very specific machine her father built. A machine that's decided the best use of technology is to militarize and mechanize everything. It builds its own loyal mechanical army, it runs on cold logic, and anyone who pushes back ends up in trouble. One of those people is Pola's father. Before he's kidnapped by his own invention, he leaves Pola a clue. There's another device out there, a prototype called Brass Heart, designed to interfere with Valkyria's will. If she can track down the scattered components of this mechanical heart, she might be able to shut the machine down and get her father back. Brass Heart leans hard into its setting, an alternate 1920s where wild inventions are just normal. Hop from European places full of polished metal and gilt furniture to remote Himalayan villages overlooking giant industrial contraptions. Every location is a hand-drawn 2D backdrop with a colorful, slightly cartoony-inspired diesel punk look. Big engines, anti-gravity rigs, dirigibles humming in the background, automatons shuffling through ornate architecture. Moment to moment, this is a very classic point and click. You're repairing busted mechanisms, abusing weird inventions like lasers and levitating statues, and using whatever's lying around to solve problems in a very I can't believe that worked type of way. What makes it stand out is its tone. It doesn't lean into grim dark, robots overthrowing humanity, and the world feels really handmade. Chunky engines, elaborate devices, a lot of brass and rivets and steampunky sepia, and Pola herself, scrappy, competent, and just the right side of reckless. Reviews have pointed out that it's on the easier side, which I must agree with, and it's very generous with its hints and character prompts, which is why I think it actually makes a great entry point if you fell off the genre years ago and want something welcoming rather than punishing. Up next at number 9 is The Beekeeper's Picnic, a Sherlockian adventure. This adventure game is the equivalent of a Sunday afternoon. It's also set in the 1920s, but follows Sherlock Holmes, and he's officially clocked out. He's living in the village of Fulworth, fussing over his beehives and planning a gentle clifftop picnic for Watson, who's come home from the First World War banged up and exhausted. That's the plan, at least. The village has other ideas. Missing pets, stolen curiosities, odd bodies in inconvenient locations. Every time you try to organize sandwiches, someone turns up with a problem only Holmes can solve. What I like is the scale. It's really mundane. It's not some grand conspiracy. It's a cluster of small human messes in a compact village map, all wired together by gossip, grudges, and charm. You wander between cozy pixel art interiors and sea cliffs, talking to nosy locals, and work through puzzles that often have more than one solution. So it feels like your version of Holmes is shaping the day. It's fully voice acted, and there's a built-in hint system, so the difficulty is pretty forgiving without being completely brain off. If you want a low-stakes, well-written mystery that still lets Sherlock feel sharp without being grim, this is a perfect wrap yourself in a blanket and click on everything sort of game. Coming in at number 8, Duck Detective, The Ghost of Glamping. Now, on the other end of the subtlety spectrum, you are a washed-up duck detective at a cursed glamping resort. Duck Detective, The Ghost of Glamping is a short 2 to 3 hour cozy mystery. You waddle around the campground, interview a cast of extremely dramatic campers, and use little fill-in-the-blank deduction puzzles to piece together what's actually going on. The hook is its tone. The art is bright and cartoony, the characters are ridiculous, and your protagonist, Eugene McQuacklin, is equal parts noir investigator and bread-addicted disaster. The writing leans into wordplay and visual gags without ever turning the case into complete nonsense. Why it's on the list? This is the perfect one-evening adventure. It's funny, fully voice-acted, and just involved enough that you feel clever, without grinding your brain against a brick wall. If you want something breezy in between games, especially heavier games, this one's a really good palate cleanser. At number 7, we have Old Skies. Old Skies is your big, chewy sci-fi entry on this list. You play Fia Quinn, a time agent from the Chrono Zen agency, babysitting rich clients who have paid a lot of money to sightsee in the past. 7 separate cases, all set in New York City but across 2 centuries, from Prohibition speakeasies to Gilded Age gangs to the World Trade Center on September 10, 2001. Mechanically, it's classic Wajidai. Sharp writing, thoughtful puzzles, lots of dialogue, and a focus on story rather than inventory hoarding. Reviews call out how smartly the game handles time travel, rules, and paradoxes. Your character's not just jumping around for the fun of it. You're cleaning up people's bad decisions in the timeline. What makes it special? Time travel in games and media often turns into a gimmick. Old Skies treats it almost like a case law. Your job is to understand what should have happened and how your clients are disturbing it. It's one of the few time travel adventures that feels like it respects both history and player intelligence. At number 6, we have Kathy Rain 2, Soothsayer. Kathy Rain has always been that stubborn, chain-smoking little gremlin riding her bike into the worst parts of town because someone has to ask questions. Soothsayer drops her into 1998, a few years after the first game, and things are not so great. She's quit smoking, which is a plus. She's a real PI with her own office and everything, but she's broke, living in a grimy city apartment/office that possibly doesn't even have a bathroom. I mean, I guess showering has never really been her thing, but I'm getting off track here. You play as Kathy Rain as she gets pulled into a case involving a serial killer known as the Soothsayer. The trail drags her through Cassidy, a city that feels like it's rotting from the inside. Neon, rain, late 90s tech, and that particular flavor of urban paranoia. It's still very much a point-and-click adventure game. Talk to people, gather leads, work through your notebook. But the sequel is more polished. It leans harder into psychological horror and long-term consequences than the original. Critics highlight strong writing, atmospheric pixel art, and that same grounded, slightly bitter tone that made Kathy such a memorable protagonist the first time around. What makes it special? Soothsayer doesn't feel like nostalgia for the 90s. It feels like The Hangover. It's an adventure game about what happens after your cool girl detective phase, when the world hasn't magically fixed itself and you still have rent to pay. Coming in hot at number 5, we have Rosewater. Rosewater is a Western, but not the kind people usually mean when they say Western. Set in the same world as Lamplight City, it follows Harley Ledger, a former wrestler turned writer, who gets pulled into a treasure hunt that spirals into a cross-country road trip. You move through frontier towns, dusty ports, and border spaces that feel just a little too familiar if you live in the American Southwest. The art is rich and painterly, all warm skies and worn wood. You scoop up a caravan of characters along the way who feel like they've been living there for a long time before you showed up. They feel like they don't just exist for the purpose of player-character interaction. Reviews note branching paths, multiple ways to solve situations, and a focus on party dynamics, your crew members, and how you treat them. What makes it special? Rosewater doesn't treat the frontier like a theme park, or some glamorized version of the wild, wild west we often see in media. It remembers that land was taken, that railroads and borders have consequences. And underneath the jokes and brawls, there's a quiet awareness of colonial history that gives the story real weight. And that's pretty rare in a genre obsessed with cowboy cosplay, and something I definitely want to see more of. And that brings us to number 4, Near Mage. Near Mage is a summer art school in Transylvania, if art school was also involved with spellcrafting, divination, and questionable dorm decor. You play a young woman visiting relatives in modern-day Sigishwara, who promptly gets enrolled in the nearby Institute of Transylvanian Magic. The game blends point-and-click exploration with light RPG elements. You build a spell deck out of feelings, fears, and some weird little memories, then use those spells to solve puzzles and navigate social situations. The look is a big part of the charm. Super vibrant, hand-drawn, slightly punk, full of stitched-together posters and inked shadows. It feels like flipping through someone's sketchbook while they tell you about their strange, messy, beautiful life. Why is it on the list? Near Mage is one of those few games this year that really commits to magic as personal history. Your spells grow out of who you are, not just what your character sheet. And there's multiple ways to solve a problem. It's funny, occasionally sharp, and surprisingly heartfelt. The puzzles aren't hard. They're not even challenging, really. But the story, the artwork, the full immersion of Near Mage more than makes up for that. Also, I love that your character has a space to occupy. She's got her own room and wardrobe, and I thought that was a really cute way to let the player feel more of those RPG elements. So, if you like adventure games with a bit of chaos and a lot of mood, this one's easy to recommend. At number 3, we have The Drifter. The Drifter is the sit-up straighter in your chair game on this list. You're Mick Carter, a drifter heading home for a funeral. Within minutes, he witnesses a murder, gets himself killed, and then snaps back to life seconds before it happens. From there, it's all running, hiding, and piecing together a conspiracy that keeps widening. It's a pulp thriller in point-and-click form, with tight cinematic framing, a moody synth score, and narration that leans into grimy noir instead of winking parody. Reviews call it a standout adventure game. Fast-paced, well-acted, and mechanically streamlined so you're not stuck wrestling with the interface while the story barrels forward. What makes it special? Most adventure games are content with letting you amble. The Drifter drags you. It uses the genre's tools, dialogue trees, inventory puzzles, but keeps you on a rail of escalating tension. If you want something that feels like a 70s grindhouse thriller translated into pixels, this may just be the one for you. At number 2, we have Cabernet. Now, it isn't surprising that this one's high up on my list. I absolutely loved this game. I did a podcast episode on it, and I'm still playing it till this day. Cabernet asks a simple question. If you become a vampire in a corrupt 19th century town, what exactly happens to your principles once you get hungry? You play Lisa, a newly turned undead in a late 1800s Eastern European-inspired city where every salon and alley hides some mix of politics, class resentment, and supernatural obligation. It's a 2D choice-driven narrative RPG with adventure game DNA. Instead of combat stats, you build skills like art, history, and science, then use those in conversations and investigations. Who you feed on, who you side with, what you reveal, the game remembers. Reviews highlight its branching paths, multiple endings, and the way its morality system feels like a real compromise rather than just a visible good versus evil slider. Visually, Cabernet leans into a paper cutout look. Characters move like they're part of a shadow box theater, all layered, fragile illustration and careful lighting. It's pretty, but in a way that keeps you slightly uneasy, which fits the whole beautiful, delicate people doing horrible things over wine vibes. What makes it special? Cabernet takes the fantasy of being a vampire and turns it into a problem you can't always charm your way out of. Power, class, and appetite are baked into the mechanics. If you like long, talky adventures where the choices actually sting, this is the year's standout. And now, at the top of the list, a cozy game that goes boo on the bayou. Foolish Mortals. Foolish Mortals drops you on Devil's Rock, a foggy island off 1930s Louisiana. You're Murphy McCallan, an auditor chasing the lost treasure of Belmore Manor, where an entire wedding party mysteriously vanished 33 years earlier. On paper, it sounds like a classic Southern Gothic horror. In practice, it's merry and macabre. Lots of ghosts, yes, but also a very human cast. A dense little island to explore and puzzles that feel tuned to satisfying, rather than break out your graph paper. The built-in hint system is integrated as Murphy's Diary, which lets you nudge yourself forward without killing the mood. The characters are fully fleshed out, well, as much as ghosts can be, and everything about this game, from story to setting to voice acting, the handcrafted art, really modernizes point-and-click structure with a much better traversal system and UI, while still feeling like a true descendant of the 90s classics. Foolish Mortals feels like a new starter pack recommendation. If someone tells you they want to understand why people still care about adventure games in 2025, or get into playing them in general, you could hand them this. It's approachable, complete, compelling, and confident. Like a studio that grew up on Monkey Island and finally got to make their own ghost-ridden island in return. So, that's my very scientific, extremely unbiased ranking of the best point-and-click adventure games of 2025. This year made something really clear. The genre isn't dead. It just moved out of the spotlight for a while, and came back with better lighting and a stronger sense of self. You've got small, cozy mysteries about ducks and beekeeping. You've got big, emotionally messy stories about vampires, drifters, and time cops. You've got magical grad school in Transylvania, sitting next to a haunted island off Louisiana. Like, that's a perfectly normal shelf to share. If you're a lifelong adventure game nerd, I hope at least one of these nudged you in the, oh, I really have to play that direction. If you're newer to the genre, my secret agenda is that you pick one game from the list that feels like it has your kind of flavor, and let it eat a weekend. I'll put the titles and links in the description, so you don't have to pause and squint at the screen. In the meantime, tell me your top games for 2025. What did I miss? What did I rank criminally low? What's the one game you wish more people were yelling about? Because as long as people keep making weird little worlds you can poke at with a mouse, I'm going to keep showing up here, clicking on everything and reporting back. I'm Lindsay, and I'll see you next year in the next adventure. Thanks for watching.